Beware the darkness and what lurks within it, for who can say if it means you harm? The old house, with its crumbling walls and aged windows, it can carry secrets of the like you would be horrified to learn of. The decrepit school with its empty classrooms, they're laden with dust, and there's whispers of something, someone, who still moves along those hallways. The unbearable darkness that fills your own home, shadows that move freely in the nighttime. There's something there that calls out your name when there's no one else in that house with you. What is it that is lurking, haunting you, watching you? Whose cold hand is it that touches yours in the nighttime, tearing a scream from your very soul? The smell of roses, cigars, and the sound of tears that follow you through the edges of the forest. Why is it only you can smell, see, and hear it? What is that child's voice that echoes from the darkened rooms? Rooms that you know are empty. Don't call out to them. Don't ask them what they want. Don't listen to their taunting voices as they try to lure you in. Run. Run while you can, far away from whatever it is, in the shadows. Hello and welcome. Have a seat here in the shadows with me. In the Shadows is a bi-weekly paranormal podcast. I share personal stories of the strange and unknown. Each episode will have 2 interesting tales, but only one of them will be true, and it will be up to you, the listener, to decide which one that is. All real stories that are shared are personal experiences of my own, or they come from friends and family members alike. Don't worry, I won't leave you in suspense on which one is true for very long. I reveal the truth at the beginning of each next episode, but I also leave hints in the stories to indicate which one may be false. Can you find them? All names and places are changed to protect the identity of those who share the stories, as well as those who are a part of that story. Now, let's delve into the last episode. First of all, which one did you think was the real story? On our last episode, The Watcher in the Woods, I shared 2 stories with you. The first was Don't Trust the Lightning Bugs, and the second was Out in the Darkness. Did you catch any of the indications or clues of which one was the real story? If you believed it was the first one, I'm sorry to say that you are wrong. My grandfather does have land in West Virginia, and it is exactly as I described it in the story. But there are too many houses behind his, so there's no real chance of me ever getting lost in that region. There are some deep woods along the hills of the Appalachians, especially in West Virginia, and I have gotten near lost. In fact, a couple of my cousins have fallen down a steep incline and nearly hurt themselves. In fact, if they hadn't grabbed hold of a tree, I'm sure they would be dead. The second story, Out in the Darkness, it's not my story, and I want to thank my friend Rob for sharing this story with me. It was unnerving to even think about that type of situation in the deep dark, out in the woods of Louisiana near the waters. I can't even begin to think what he and his friends experienced, and the story that he shared left me with the urge to go out there, during the daytime that is. But now it's time for us to delve into our 4th episode, Tales Around the Campfire. And I do apologize, there are some wild noises in some of these areas. Understand that I was trying to record people out while we were camping, and I even had family members send me recordings of their tales. All the stories in this episode are true, just to give you a heads up. So please sit back and enjoy. Be sure that you grab your blankets and wrap yourself up tight. Have that flashlight ready. Don't sit alone in the dark because you may get a few too many chills. Now, are you ready for our 4th episode, Tales Around the Campfire? I hope so.
This is my first experience with a full-body apparition. My friend, back in the day, got him a Palm Harbor trailer, and they delivered it to his property in Crockett, Texas. Unbeknownst to me, adjacent to the property was an old graveyard. It had been covered up by the woods of East Texas as they're very quickly growing. To save money, he roped me into helping him dig a water line. So we started at roughly about 8 in the morning digging, and we put a brisket on early in the morning. It was going all day. it was around about, I'd say, 10:30, 11 o'clock. We were done for the day, and we were finishing up the brisket, sitting out talking, and I happened to look up, and there was a man walking in my friend's back pasture. And I didn't realize it later, but he was walking underneath the power lines, directly underneath the power lines. And that'll be important in a few minutes. I'm sitting here looking at this man, and I said, Richard, and I was going to say, Richard, you have a trespasser. But as soon as I said my friend's name, Richard, the guy disappeared right in front of me. And I went, it's time to go inside, Richard. It is time to go inside. He was like, what, man? What? I said, I'll tell you when we get inside. We need to get inside now. So we packed everything up, went inside, and he said, okay, dude, what's wrong? What's wrong? I said, you're not going to believe this, but I saw a guy. I said, Richard, you're not going to believe this, but I saw a guy that looked like he came out of a little house on the prairie walking in your back pasture. And he said, oh, yeah, that's the trader. The trader? What are you talking about, dude? He's like, well, back in the 1800s, here in East Texas, there was a guy that used to go trade with the native Indians, and he went around the farms and stuff, sharpening knives and stuff. You know, over in Europe, they would have called them a tinker. But there they called him a trader. The trader. And he goes, oh yeah, he's buried in the graveyard next door. I'm like, dude, you got a graveyard next door? He goes, we've been friends for like 5 years. I've been coming out here, visiting your grandparents with you. Now you're living by them, and now you tell me you got a graveyard next door. And he's like, yeah. Is that a problem? Dude, I just saw a ghost.
So my husband and I, whenever we lived up in North Texas, we saw this house that was on sale for a pretty decent price for being in the city. We took a look at it and thought, well, you know, that looks really nice. It was this little 2-bedroom house. It was a 2-story kind of thing because they had a basement, and we were talking about using the basement part for like a family room or something like that. So anyway, we end up getting the place, we move in, and we started talking about how sometimes it would feel cold in certain rooms, how we would see like these weird shadows, and especially at night, we would be lying in bed and we would just notice the shadows kind of seem to move. Well, we didn't think anything about it because for the first few months, it was still a new house to us, and we were still kind of getting used to it. And whenever people would drive down the road, you could see their lights come through the windows every now and then, just a certain way. So we were alluding to the idea that that's what was causing the shadows to move the way they were, and we just put it down to being nothing more than our imaginations. Well, it was one day, it was a summer day, and we were sitting in the living room. I don't remember what we were doing. I know we were watching TV because all of a sudden the TV started rolling, like the screen, whatever was on the TV that day was rolling, and I couldn't figure out why it was doing that. I told my husband that maybe we had an issue with it. He started going behind there, started fooling around with the cables, and none of it would fix anything no matter what we tried. So I got back there and I started helping him. Nothing was fixing it no matter what we did. And I was taking a look at the screen. Well, whenever the screen went blank, I saw something move from the left to the right, and I screamed because we were the only ones in the house. We didn't have pets at the time. He got up, he started looking around, and he said that he saw the same shadow, or he saw a shadow moving from one place in the house to another of its own. And there was no way we should have seen something like that because, first of all, it was daytime, and we had these big old windows that the sun came through, and the way the place lit up whenever the sun came through those windows, it didn't really leave much shadowing to do. Plus, second, the way we had white walls, the way it was moving should have been impossible because he said it was like it started from the lower part, descended upward, curved backward, then went back up like it was just a straight line. We didn't really stay in that house for long. We were just renting it anyway. but it creeped us out. We stayed there about 7 or 8 months, and the shadows, they started getting bigger and moving more. And then we started noticing that things around the house were starting to move, and we could tell it was just going to ramp up from there. I think the last time that we actually stayed there, we were already talking about moving, packing our stuff up. He had gone to the bathroom, and I heard him calling my name. Well, whenever he came back, I asked him, "What did you want from the bathroom?" He goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You called my name." He goes, "No, I didn't. I have no reason to call your name." I said, "I kid you not. I heard you just call my name." We were lying there in bed, and I heard it again. Somebody called my name. My husband turned, and he looked at me. He goes, "Somebody just called your name." I said, "I know." We're the only ones that were living there, so nothing should have been calling my name. I don't know what it was, but it scared the daylights out of us. We moved that next week. We were not going to stay in that house. That was just too much for us at that point. And I would go out there to see them pretty often. But we had this one house that was beside my grandmother's house. I never went by there because of the fact it always kind of creeped me out. But one day my cousins and I decided we were going to go in there, just kind of take a look around the place. It was pretty ramshackled. It was run down. Nobody lived in it for like the past 10 years that they knew of. So we went in there. It was an old wooden structure, and we were already kind of nervous because there were spider webs and a lot of old detritus, whatever you want to call that stuff. But we went in, we were looking around, and we went into one of the bedrooms, and it looked like there was a lot of old stuff from whoever lived there before had just left it behind. And we were going through it because kids will be nosy, kids will be curious, that kind of thing. And as we were looking, it felt like somebody grabbed one of our ankles underneath the bed. So my cousin screamed about it and went running out, and we started laughing, thinking somebody else had got it under the bed. They wanted to see what was under there. We didn't see anything, but we felt something cold coming up from underneath. So anyway, my other cousin started reaching under there, and she swore somebody grabbed her arm and pulled her like toward the bed. So she started screaming. We didn't believe her so much. We thought maybe she was just freaking out. She'd worked herself up or something like that. My other cousin and I and one of our friends that usually would go on these trips with us or go look around other places that were abandoned, we all went into one of the back bedrooms that was back there. It looked like a kid's room. While we were back there, we heard another kid up toward the front of the house was running up and down the hallway, like light little steps of them running back and forth down the hallway and giggling. And it was really light, so we didn't think anything about it. We thought maybe one of the cousins had decided to come back in there. They were trying to mess with us. And while we were rummaging around in this little kid's room, we saw a kid, like a shadow of a kid, up against the wall, move toward us, then duck underneath this table that was there. That freaked us out so much that we decided we had had enough. As we were running out, we were going down the hallway, something pushed me hard enough that I tripped, and I knocked my cousin down on the way out of there. I turned around, and I could see the shadow of that kid or whatever it was. It was just standing there, and it was watching us as we were fleeing. We never went back in that house again after that, but we had another cousin who decided they were going to go in there because they had heard about the place. We'd always talked about it, but this cousin was never around very much, so they went in there. They were in there maybe 30 minutes. We heard screaming, and it didn't sound anything like my cousin. My cousin is female. This sounded like a deeper male voice, and we were in our teens. So I don't think she would have been able to replicate a male's voice. She came running out of there, and she said that not only did something pull her hair, pull her back, but she could actually hear whatever it was screaming in her ear.
I was renting the property. I had my single wide trailer. I was working at Cooper Power Systems there on the loop in Nacogdoches, second shift. My sister calls me up and she says, "Darren, are you coming home tonight?" Right after work. I'm like, "Well, I can," because I usually stopped off at Nine Flags, a local hole-in-the-wall bar, before I went home. She says, "Please come home." So I come home. All the lights are on. And I'm like, okay. And I said, "What's going on?" She goes, "You're not going to believe this, but I was asleep, and we had a little dachshund named Jake. Jake was up underneath the covers as always. And Darren, I was sound asleep. I felt like someone was watching me. And I woke up and no one was there. Then Jake came out of the covers, from beneath the covers, went to the bed and started wagging his tail, looking up, whining. Like, I'm a cute dachshund, pet me. Because Jake believed that everybody on the world was meant to pet him. So, very friendly dachshund. He jumped off the bed and followed whatever it was down the hallway into my room. And then, mind you, this is what my sister Jo was telling me. Jake hopped up on the windowsill and started whining because, hey, this is a new friend that's leaving. I don't want him to leave. And I'm like, okay, Joe watches scary movies. Imagination's probably running rampant. And then about 2 weeks later, I'm dozing because I had to go in on a Saturday, and I was dozing in the chair because I was working second shift. And I hear the boards creaking because I lived in a single wide trailer. I could hear the floor creaking. And I opened up and I looked around. Jake was sitting there on the couch just wagging his tail, whining and all excited. And I went, okay, now it's happened to me. And I calmly went, hey, look, man, I know you don't mean me and my family any harm. But could you please stop walking through my trailer because you're freaking my sister out? I understand. She does not. So could you please go around my house? Believe it or not, we never had any we never had any activity after that. Believe it or not.
I believe it.
And I met Sarah from the East Texas track team. She can give you the acronym for it. I forget. So I met Sarah. Sarah was a part of the East Texas track team. So I got involved in that. I got to studying the paranormal pretty hard. Because, like everybody, I was always interested in Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster and stuff. And I always went, there's got to be a logical explanation for things. Well, I get into the track team and I experience stuff, but a lot of stuff could be explained away. But the stuff that could not be explained away, in my opinion, electromagnetic fields were present. Okay, so we go into a house, it would be hot with electromagnetic fields.
EMT, yeah.
Yeah. We cut all the power off, okay, and okay, we're dead. Our instruments should not be, okay, now my instrument's going. There's nothing to set this, detector off. So I came up with a theory. And I watched other documentaries, and I noticed in the documentaries, and people go, "Oh yeah, it was right over here. It was right over here." It was always around power stations or stuff producing electromagnetic fields. So my theory, and it's a theory, is that that's one of the things that ghosts feed off of to manifest.
Yeah. I thought I would share a personal experience that happened to me whenever I was 15 years old. And this is a story I haven't told anybody because I still don't have a clear explanation of what I saw and what I heard. But for this, since it's such a short story, I thought I would share it. My grandmother lived on about 5 or 6 acres in 2 trailer homes that had been connected to each other. And I would often spend weekends with her, especially during the summer. I loved going out there all the time. And because they had such a huge amount of land, it was easy for me and my cousins to go wandering around, looking the area over. We enjoyed it. So whenever I was there on my own, I had no problem with having free reign, going to the pond that was nearby, going and climbing up trees. I just had to remember that there were lots of wild animals out there, and I needed to beware. So usually during the summertime, I would get a loaf of bread, or I would get old bread from my grandmother. I would go out to that pond, feed the fish and the ducks if they were ever out there. And I was out there, it was near my birthday, I remember that. I was tearing the bread out, tossing it out to the fish. There were no ducks that day. And I heard somebody call my name. And this sounded like it was a good distance away. But I looked around. I know my grandmother's voice. It was clearly not my grandmother's voice. And I heard it again as I was looking around. Again, there's nobody out there. And I would have probably seen somebody after a short while if they were close enough to call my name. At least I'm assuming they would. Well, as I was looking around, there was churning in the water. I turned back around to see what it could have been that was making the water churn. And I noticed fish were jumping frantically. And as somebody who's grown up in the woods, I know that fish usually jump like that whenever there's a predator of some sort. That freaked me out into thinking it was an alligator in the water. And it scared me enough that I just dropped all the bread and I went running home. Well, later that night, I was still thinking about what had happened out there at the water. And I could have sworn again I heard somebody calling my name, except it sounded like it was right outside the window. I pulled back the curtain, I looked outside, I didn't see anybody. And it scared me. It really scared me to think somebody was out there, that they were stalking me, that they were playing a prank. And I quickly shut the curtains again and laid back on bed. I turned up the television and I basically just ignored the sound. Well, the next day, apparently it looked like there was a big mess that was outside my window. And my grandmother accused me of doing it. I told her, no, ma'am, I didn't go outside for anything last night. I wouldn't have done something like this. It looked like something basically had clawed the ground relentlessly all along that window, all along, even the side of the house looked like there were a few scratches. And we figured out maybe it was just some wild animal, but it still left me with this uneasy feeling. And after that, it wasn't long after that my grandmother moved to a different house, and I was really relieved because it meant that I would never have to go back out to that land again. Well, she has neighbors that still live out there. They were 5 or 6 miles away. They ended up buying my grandmother's property, and a few years back, one of their little cousins who will come and visit us, say hi every now and then. They asked me if I'd ever seen or heard anything weird in the woods. I said, no, not really. Why? And they didn't say anything else after that. But it makes me wonder if maybe they've heard or seen something as well. As always, thank you for listening to In the Shadows, and I hope I didn't give you any dreadful nightmares tonight. Do you have a spooky tale that you'd like to share? Email me at podcastintheshadows@gmail.com or visit our Facebook group, In the Shadows Podcast. We love personal stories, pictures, and videos. Some stories will even be shared on the podcast, with permission, of course. In the Shadows is a project I've been working on for well over a year, and I'm delighted to send chills down your spine with each episode. Do you have one you've enjoyed so far? Let me know in the comments. While you're here, you should check out these awesome podcast creators as well. I'm sure you'll be just as frightfully delighted by them, if not more so. Ghostlore of Hawaii has phenomenal and historical tales of the islands of Hawaii. Uncle Jared brings a great zest to his stories. He has even left me frightened on a few occasions. The stories he shares are based on true events or are common myth known around the different islands. He has even shared a few warnings if you ever visit them as a tourist, and he's kind enough to share the slang on the local islands. I want to thank him for being an inspiration for my own podcast. You should go check him out on his website, ghostloreofhawaii.com, or on most of the streaming apps available. Are you a great fan of horror stories? Then you should go check out the old Gods of Appalachia. The episodes are released weekly, and a friend of mine introduced them to me because he does the intro music for them. I'm so thankful that he did. These stories are wonderfully detailed. This podcast isn't for the faint of heart. Please be aware that the episodes are adult rated because they're graphic in description. Go visit them at oldgodsofappalachia.com, and I promise you'll be swept up in no time. But for now, my lovelies, the sun has long set and the moon has been high for quite a while. It means that whatever is in the nighttime will be drawing near. It might be wise that you go and find your bed. Go huddle under the covers and hope that whatever it is doesn't come looking for you. And should you dare go to sleep, just remember that daylight might bring you a slight reprieve until the next time. So for now, good night, sleep tight, and don't let the ghouls bite.